Welcome to Understanding Your Reinforced Mind Guidance for Gifted Adults. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. I am Paula Prober. I am a psychotherapist and international consultant in private practice based in Eugene, Oregon, United States. For about 30 years, I've been seeing gifted adults in my counseling practice who are working through and healing from childhood trauma. And I consult with parents of gifted children and gifted adults worldwide around understanding how giftedness is affecting their relationships, their careers, their identity, and their parenting, helping them find direction and understanding and what's next in their lives. And here's a list of my background. I have been an elementary teacher, sixth grade teacher, and then I was a teacher of the gifted in grades 1 through 8 when back in the day when we had pull-out programs. And I started doing teacher training, parent classes, summer programs for gifted children, and and then I went back to school when I was 39 and got my master's in counseling with a concentration in working with the gifted. Um, and then I, started a psychotherapy practice, started consulting. Partly, what happened was I started a blog about 11 years ago, and then I got known for writing about giftedness, and that's how I started getting clients for my consulting practice. And I'm a tango dancer and a blogger and author. Let me show you. I've got 3 books published. The first one is the more comprehensive book. This is the one you want if you want a lot of details about what it's like to be gifted, to have a reinforced mind. And there are a lot of case studies of my counseling clients in the book. And then the one on the right, the journey book, is a compilation of um, my blog posts that were the most popular in the first 4 years of the blog. And that's the short one. It's an easy read. It's a quick read. It could be useful to hand to people if you want them to understand you or you want a place to begin to talk about giftedness because it's a quick read. And then this is my most recent book, Saving Your Reinforced Mind, and this is a guided journal. And I was thinking that I think the gifted clients that I work with sometimes if they can't get access to a therapist, if they can't get into therapy, if they can't find a good coach, they can work through their own gifted issues, their reinforced minds through their own journal writing. All right, so today, this is going to go maybe about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and this is what I'm covering today. I'm going to initially talk about what's the reinforced mind analogy, how did that come about, and then go through some of the traits and characteristics of gifted adults and teens that I've worked with, and talk about the strategies and resources that I recommend to them for their self-understanding and their living a fulfilling life. Let's see. So, first, the analogy of the reinforced mind. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, "I'm not gifted, but I think I fit the reinforced mind model," and that's often because, and I'm not, I don't know, I'd be curious to know how you translate the word gifted into Portuguese and how if people have the same trouble with that word. But in English, there's a lot of controversy around what's the definition of gifted, who is gifted and who's not gifted, and do we use IQ tests or how do you measure it, and blah, all of that. So that's what's happening in this country. And then when I was teaching, I wanted to come up with some way that I could explain what gifted kids are like. And I came up with this idea that if people are ecosystems, some are like meadows, and some are like deserts, and some are like volcanoes, and some are like the rainforest. And they're all beautiful and valuable and important. And the rainforest is just the most complex ecosystem on the planet, like these dinosaurs and so, and like ourselves. uh, so um, so that was helpful for people. They were a little more comfortable with that as a definition. And I would also add that I came up with this metaphor, and I would say not all people who are advanced intellectually fit all the traits of the rainforest-minded person. You'll see what I mean as I get into describing them. But all rainforest-minded people also are intellectually advanced. What I'd like to do now is introduce you to one rainforest-minded person. This is a picture of them. And I'm going to introduce you to this person through a soliloquy or a monologue. And what I've done is taken comments that my clients over the years have said to me and put them all into one speech. And so this is maybe about 5 minutes. And just see as you listen to it if which traits that are described here would fit for you or your clients. So here's Jude. First of all, just so you know, I'm not gifted. I don't even like the word. What does it mean? Is it fair to say that some people are gifted and some aren't? The truth is, it never really did me any good to be labeled gifted when I was a kid. Yeah, they tested me for the gifted program in school, but I just got bullied. And I spent a lot of time waiting for other kids to catch up, waiting for the teacher to teach something I didn't know, waiting to find a friend who could keep up with me, who could understand me. I'm still waiting for that friend. But I'm not gifted. I didn't get great grades in school. I wasn't the valedictorian. I even started failing classes in high school. There wasn't enough time to think. Sure, I got good test scores, but the tests were easy. Don't gifted people get all A's all the time? I didn't always get A's. Really, I'm not gifted. I haven't won a Nobel Prize. I haven't won any prize. Okay, well, there was the spelling bee in third grade. Does that count? I'm just a regular person. True, they called me geek, nerd, show off, know it all, but I don't know. I don't know it all. Far from it. I'd love to know it all, but that's impossible. I'd love to know it all. I want to learn everything about everything. I've got all of this unbridled enthusiasm about learning stuff. People find it very annoying, Why can't I just be satisfied with a good football game or with watching The Bachelor on TV? But I know I'm not gifted. I worry all the time. Am I saying the right thing, doing the right thing? I can't sleep at night because there's so much rumination, so many thoughts in so many different directions. I can't turn off my brain. Surely, if I were smart, I'd be able to stop worrying and figure things out. I'd be able to meditate easily and find enlightenment for heaven's sake. But no, there's so much thinking. They called me an overthinker when I was 5, and I'm still overthinking. I'm not gifted. I can't make decisions. There are always so many variables and variables within the variables. I can't even decide what color to paint the living room. I've painted it 12 times in the past 4 years, and it still isn't right. And well, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I'm overwhelmed by the number of interests I have. I changed majors 4 times in college and took 7 years to graduate. Don't gifted people know what they know? Uh, they make clear, confident action. Aren't they all prodigies and have a clear direction from the time they're born? Not me. Look, I'm just not gifted. I tend to go from job to job, still trying to find my path. I learn a job in about 2 years or less and then get bored and want to try something new. I have a resume that's all over the place. Coworkers aren't very fond of me either. I get frustrated at meetings while I'm waiting for them to figure out what I told them at the beginning of the meeting or 2 months ago. I am not patient or a good team player. Um, yeah, other people are so lazy and they don't listen to me. I get irritated easily. Not very gifted, if you ask me. I'm telling you, I'm not gifted. Anyway, it's too much responsibility. Um, I mean, if I were gifted, wouldn't I have to change the world? I'm just a mom raising a kid who is still throwing tantrums, and he's 8 years old. He's so sensitive and so emotional. See, I'm failing as a parent. I'm so not gifted. Really, truly, I'm not gifted. I just have very high standards and expectations and think everyone ought to live up to them. It's important to keep raising that bar, don't you think? How else will civilization evolve? Of course, I probably shouldn't take an hour to write a 3 sentence email. Yeah, sure. That might be a teensy weensy bit excessive, but still, standards, morals, ethics, expectations, I can't lower my standards. And I can tell you for sure that I'm not gifted. Professionals have told me so, and they should know, right? I've been diagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder, attention deficit disorder, and one time bipolar disorder. No one has ever diagnosed me with gifted disorder. Wouldn't my doctor tell me if I had it? I may be crazy, but I'm not gifted. I go nuts when the lights are buzzing and no one else hears them, when the leaf blowers are blowing, when I know someone who is depressed and faking it. I talk, I talk to trees and they talk back to me. Crazy, right? But really, trees, rivers, birds, they're the sane ones. They're gifted. Okay, I know I may sound a little intense. um, Let's see. But people say I talk too fast, but I'm actually cranking back my intensity right now, and I'm not talking as quickly as I'm thinking. Just so you know, but even though I'm not gifted, okay, even though I'm not gifted, I may fit some of the characteristics of the reinforced mind. I can relate to that analogy. My brain does feel like a jungle. I'm complicated, sensitive, colorful, creative, overwhelming for sure, resourceful, and I've definitely run into chainsaws in my life. People have clearly wanted me to be cut down and turned into something I'm not. That's for certain. Sad, but true. Not that I'm complaining. I'm grateful for this life and for what I've got. Very grateful. It's just that sometimes those chainsaws, sometimes they're just too much. And if I were gifted, which I'm not, but if I were, I would want to send it back, send that gift back to the manufacturer for a refund, unwrap the gift and send it back. Yeah, but I'm not gifted. Mhm. So just take a moment and see how that feels to hear that and see, just check in with yourself to see if any of those those comments rang true to you and to the people that you work with, the clients that you see, the students that you see. I'm not sure if all of you are psychotherapists or some of you are teachers, but whoever it is that you work with, and I'm thinking with yourself, just reflect on if you relate to these traits that I just described. And then now I'm going to go into some of these traits and then give you some strategies and resources to work with. I have had clients tell me that they're afraid actually that they're crazy for many reasons. And sometimes it's because of the sensitivity, empathy, and intuition that the reinforced minded gifted person has. Again, not every intellectually advanced person has these traits, but all the reinforced minded people have these traits. What I'm going to do is not go through everything on the list, but if you can just look through the list on each slide, I'm going to just mention a few of them and give you some examples of clients. So one example of a client with a lot of sensitivity, name these clients, but of course I'm not going to use their real names, but let's say this client's name is Roy. And he came to me, he was 57 when he came to see me. And he told me a story about when he was 8 years old at recess and enthralled by a grasshopper. And another boy came along and smashed the grasshopper, and he was devastated. He remembered that as a 57-year-old man because he's sensitive and cares about nature and animals and everything. And he remembered how hard that was and how emotional he was around it. Another example that he gave to me was when he was in high school. A teacher told him to pick up the pace in science class. He was slow, but he was slow because he was amazed by what he saw under the microscope. And the other kids didn't care. They just wanted to, get the assignment done. But Roy just was enthralled by the study and he was interested in learning, and the other kids in the class weren't. He felt he wasn't very smart because he was so slow. It can be particularly difficult to be a sensitive male. As we look at this list, you probably have heard a lot of people talk about self-care, and that's really important. It's like, oh, you're so smart. You shouldn't need self-care, right? You can figure things out on your own. But right, you often have a highly sensitive nervous system and care deeply and have a lot of empathy. There's a lot happening now on planet Earth. And in my country, in the United States, it's very stressful right now. And I'm guessing, with this new administration here, it's very hard. And the highly sensitive people, I think it's even harder to wrap their heads around what's going on. And yeah, so I'm without getting into that. These are really hard times right now. So it's even more important to do the self-care, to take care of yourselves, set boundaries. One self-care process that I use, I see an acupuncturist. If we find some good practitioners for different physiological care, that would be really important. Acupuncture happens to be one that I use. Finding these apps that are for calming yourself, setting boundaries. Sometimes, if you have a lot of empathy and if you have some trauma in your background, it may be hard for you to set boundaries. And one other one that I will just mention here is, let's see. Oh, yes. Because this really fits for the rainforest minded person. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, right? Um, there's so many things you're capable of, so many things you can do. That if you said yes to everything you're capable of, you would be just overwhelmed and burnt out. So one thing to remember is for all that sensitivity and empathy, excuse me, is that you need to learn how to say no to some things that are just less important to you, or people who are asking for help all the time, and they can maybe do things themselves. They don't need you to help them. There's a whole lot we could say about this, but that's all I'll say for that. Just think about how to say no to people, because you don't have to save everyone. You don't have to rescue everyone. It would, yeah. So, okay. um, Next, I'd love to know it all. I want to know everything about everything. That's a common trait, that loving learning. Schooling isn't necessarily great for rainforest minded people, although it can be fine. You can have some great teachers and really love learning. In this country, the schools are still struggling and not particularly serving this population of kids, for sure. But you love learning, and you may need to do that outside of school some of the time. I had a 16-year-old client who was taking math at the university, and she was great. I'm guessing she was probably profoundly gifted. She talked to me about the philosophers that she was reading, who I had never heard of, and she spoke very fast. And when I mentioned to her about how quickly she was speaking, she looked at me like, she looked at me, and she said she was slowing down for me. She really wasn't talking as fast as she was thinking. And so I had to laugh. She was accommodating my slow brain. And she wasn't doing that out of arrogance. It was just the truth. It was just what was true. She talked to me about feeling very lonely. She had trouble finding people who were like her. In the class that she was taking at the university, none of the other kids connected with her. Unfortunately, the professor made a comment one day when he said, "No one likes a know-it-all." And she told me that, and she was just so sad about that and so hurt. This professor was really, well, I don't know what to say, but it was just awful. And she wasn't trying to be a know-it-all. She wanted somebody to debate with her. She wanted to talk about the complexity of what she was learning, and no one got her. So that's one example of why it's so lonely, often why relationships can be difficult when you have a rainforest mind. Some of the strategies, I learned the Argentine tango a number of years ago and still practice dancing that dance. But for you all in Brazil, I'm thinking maybe the samba is your, I don't know, you'll have to tell me, but your main social dance. Well, when I started taking lessons, there were a lot of what I would call smart people there, a lot of gifted people learning the tango because They were attracted to it because it's creative and complex, and you need to be highly sensitive to do that dance well. And so that was interesting. And I had someone who was doing the dance who was obviously gifted telling me that he finally felt like people were following him because in the dance people followed him, and he didn't have to explain anything. He didn't have to use his words. So I'll be curious to know if you experience the samba in Brazil, or if there are other social dances where you can find other rainforest-minded people there. I tell my clients sometimes what you can do is find the things you love to do and look for the gifted people there. The more you understand what rainforest minds look like, what they act like, who they are, and how you are that way, the more you'll be able to find others like you, and then make some friends. Take the risk to get to know them, to ask them to coffee, or to take a hike with you, or something where you create the relationship, where you build relationships with them. There's a thing called the Silent Book Club. I haven't checked to see if there are any of those in Brazil, but I'm guessing there might be. It's an international organization where people get together and they read books. It's not like a book club where everybody reads the same book. You just bring your book to the pub or to the location where people sit, and maybe they have a cup of tea or maybe they have a glass of wine and they're reading their books. So look for silentbook.club for some places where that's happening. There's a resource called Putty Like, which I will also mention later when I talk about multipotentiality, but that's a site for people who have lots of interests, and you can join them and get to know other gifted people. And then these names, John Wellwood, Esther Perel, Alain de Botton, these are all people who write about relationships in general, but they're really good resources about relationships. So I probably shouldn't take an hour to write a 3-sentence email. This one, as you can imagine, is about perfectionism. Many people with rainforest minds have high standards and high expectations, which we can call perfectionism. And there are actually two types of perfectionism. There's a healthy type, actually, and an unhealthy type. And sometimes I call the healthy type intrinsic and the unhealthy extrinsic. And I will explain why. What I have seen in many of my clients, maybe all of my clients, is this healthy inner perfectionism where they're striving, just naturally striving for beauty, balance, precision, justice, and harmony. That's the best way for me to describe it. It's really amazing, and it's what helps people, it's what drives people, I guess I could say, for excellence, for beauty, for creating finding the perfect words, conducting the beautiful symphony, baking the perfect pie, designing the precise video game, whatever it is that you're doing, you just have this need to make it perfect, even though we know nothing's perfect, but it's precise, it's balanced, it's just. And this type of perfectionism isn't really explained or understood very well in many places. And what I tell my clients is that that's beautiful, and you want to nourish that and nurture that. And it just can become a problem when you need to get something finished. and um, and so sometimes, you never want to finish something because there's more to do. There's more to do to make it more beautiful. That can be difficult. And so you tell your clients, you tell yourself that you need to prioritize sometimes. And like this 3-sentence email, you don't want to spend hours writing your email. Some things don't need to be beautiful. And so that's some of what I talk to clients about with the intrinsic perfectionism, but understanding that it's really a beautiful trait, and we, things are beautiful and harmonious because of it. Then the unhealthy perfectionism is an interesting one because that anybody can have that. You don't have to be gifted to have that anxiety about is it perfect? Am I good enough? It's not good enough? Fear of failure and that kind of thing. But the rainforest minded person has that in a particular form because sometimes when you're a young child and your parents and teachers recognize your giftedness, sometimes there's an overemphasis on your accomplishments, on your achievements. And that can create this anxiety for the child if everyone is always praising you for how much you achieve, or people are always saying, "Oh, you're so smart," over and over. That can create pressure and a sense of expectations, and that you're loved because you are so smart. That can create this anxiety around being needing to perform, needing to achieve. You're not going to be loved if you're not a high achiever. And so that creates this unhealthy perfectionism. Some of the strategies to work with that would be striving for excellence or wholeness or balance instead of perfection. Writing in your journal to your inner critic. If you're dealing with this unhealthy perfectionism, sometimes that shows up in lots of self-criticism, a critical voice in your head, berating you. And so if you start to build a relationship with your inner critic and you have dialogues and conversations with that part of you, that can help calm the critical voice. Noticing when you get stuck in all or nothing thinking, sometimes that happens, or catastrophic thinking. And and then I guess I would say that it's recognizing that this is what's going on. Sometimes that's the time to see a therapist if it's really deeply seated, because it can be seated in trauma as well. The child who's grown up in a dysfunctional family or with trauma can feel like, again, they're not good enough and they need to be perfect. And so it gets to be very complex. When I work with clients, it takes a long time to unravel it and to work through it and to understand it, and then to start to shift some of that. Failures make great stories for TED Talks and memoirs. People don't want to hear about all your successes. They want to hear about your failures. So, and then there's a book called Mindset, which is a good book that helps reframe this idea of perfectionism. The next one, don't gifted people get all A's all the time. I didn't always get A's. That relates to what maybe you are familiar with, this thing called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is common. I've seen it in a lot of rainforest minded clients. And I actually have a list of many reasons for imposter syndrome. So I have some of them listed here. You know how much you don't know is one of them. There are a lot of reasons why you might have it. And so I'm just going to read a few of them. Because it's helpful to understand it. This particular book is a pretty good book explaining imposter syndrome, particularly in women. But let me just mention a few reasons for it. So one, is that justice and fairness thing that you have. So you're not supposed to think you're smarter than anyone else, because that can be misinterpreted to, oh, you think you're so smart, or you think you're better than us. Or you value social justice, and it would be unfair to think of someone is gifted and because someone else is not. Sometimes it's a fear of success. It's a lot of pressure to keep up being so smart. If you're in a therapy role, if you understand, if your parents were narcissistic in some way and needed you to be gifted, so you don't want to be like them, and so you ignore, or you deny that you're gifted. You may feel pressure to be smart as a child, and the expectations were overwhelming. You may lack self-confidence. People tell you you're so smart, but you feel like you're just lucky. The tests were easy. Let's see what else. And you always know someone who is smarter or you know how much you don't know. You didn't get high test scores. Some gifted folks in school do really well in school, and some do not. Some are not high achievers. School doesn't work for them, and um, so they don't necessarily stand out in school. And the mythology is that a gifted person will do well in school, will get high grades um, and high test scores. And if giftedness is measured by high IQ, some gifted people do very well on IQ tests and others don't. So that can contribute to your imposter syndrome. I can't make decisions. There are so many variables within variables within variables. Yes, decisions can be difficult when you have a rainforest mind. And again, that's another thing where how is that possible? I mean, smart people should be able to make decisions because you know so much. But in your creative, gifted brain or rainforest minded brain, you can think of so many possibilities. It's overwhelming. So, how do you choose? How do you decide when there are so many possibilities? And then you want to be ethical. And then you don't want to disappoint people. It's complicated. Decision making is more than it's just not simple like many things in the rainforest mind. The other piece is multipotentiality, which is related to decision making, which is having so many interests and so many career possibilities and not wanting to stay in one particular career for your whole life, needing to change jobs and feeling like something's wrong with you if you are changing careers and jobs every few years. But that can happen when you have a rainforest mind. One of the strategies is meditation. Just it's for the decision making, connecting. What are the ways you connect to your intuition, going deeper into yourself, and trusting your intuition, which is one way to make at least the larger decisions. Giving yourself permission to change careers, and some of these choices or some of these interests that you have, you're not going to be able to do all of them. So truly grieving over some of the choices that you're not able to make, that you have to check off your list. Emily Wapnick wrote this book, How to Be Everything, and she's the one who runs puttylike.com. And so if you're looking for people who get you, this is the particular issue that you have, you might want to join the Puttyverse. Mm-hmm. They called me an overthinker when I was 5, and I'm still overthinking. So I have a different take on that. I like to say that, well, are you overthinking or are you just thinking like a person with a rainforest mind? The clients that I see are big thinkers and deep thinkers, and they think a lot. And other people, I make the joke, well, other people are just underthinking. You're just thinking. But so it's important for you to understand that maybe you just have a lot of thoughts and maybe it's okay. And maybe it's your intellectual, creative mind and brain. And so what I would say about that is give yourself permission to think a lot if that's the case. And um, check to see if it also might be worry or ruminating, too much worrying. Because I notice a lot of gifted rainforest minded folks worry a lot. So that's not that's okay. That's not okay. I mean, it's like you want to work on worry, right? You don't want to be catastrophizing or worrying so much or ruminating a lot. So on this list, there are some of those. It's not like if you're just thinking, great. If you're worrying, then you want some tools. You want some breathing exercises. You want to maybe exercise more, use your body, do one of those apps that are calming and soothing, get into nature. So many rainforest minded clients actually really love being in nature, and that's soothing to them and spiritual, and that can really help. So do what you need to do to calm your nervous system, especially during these times that are extra stressful. And then there are just things like hormones that might be out of whack, that you might need to have those checked. And then, of course, get therapy, which is my recommendation for everybody for every issue you have. Get therapy. Okay. So I've been diagnosed ADHD, that attention deficit disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar, but no one has diagnosed me with a gifted disorder. Okay. So there's something called twice exceptionality. And you probably know what that is. They sometimes call it 2E. It's having giftedness plus something else. Giftedness plus attention deficit disorder, giftedness plus obsessive compulsive, or dyslexia or autism. And so there are some resources here on 2E adults. But okay, so some people can have both of those things or many of those things. Some people get misdiagnosed because, let's say, they're with a therapist who doesn't understand the rainforest mind or the giftedness, and they can misdiagnose them as something else because sometimes the traits are similar. So you may need to educate your practitioners about what giftedness looks like. Sadly, sad to say, if you don't have a practitioner who understands it, you may have to explain to them what it is. Or, I mean, ideally, you find, I mean, you guys, you are, I'm assuming, training or in training to work with clients who are gifted. So that's such a blessing for them to have you when you understand it. So you will be able to differentiate between is it giftedness or is it something else or is it both? So those are some of those resources for you. That book that you see the picture of that book, that's a great book, a great resource. If I were gifted, wouldn't have to change the world. All the rainforest minded people I see are very concerned about what's happening on the planet, particularly. Well, now it's like things are really in disarray, and I don't even know what the right word is in the United States and around the world. Things are stressful and challenging, and particularly with the climate. And so you may be particularly anxious, or your clients may be particularly anxious about that. Here are some resources that are helpful. These are people who are in the field, people who write about it. Rebecca Solnit is someone actually, if you're concerned about the politics in the United States, Rebecca Solnit writes a column, and she's a great resource for that. Heather Cox Richardson down at the bottom, actually Chop Wood, Carry Water on Substack. These three are resources for finding out what's happening in the United States if you want to know more about that. But what I find is my rainforest minded clients care about what's happening beyond their particular personal world. I talk to trees and they talk back to me. Maybe you don't talk to trees, but maybe you do. But you have some kind of spirituality that is maybe a little different, that includes your sensitivity and your connection to nature, which is common in these clients. So here are some resources for support for your creativity and spirituality. I mean, this is a huge topic, right? So I'm just breezing over it. But these are a place to start. And just know that if you or your clients you're seeking something more, you have these big questions. What's the meaning of life? What's my purpose in life? These are some resources to find out more about that. The intuitive pieces, the Institute for the Noetic Sciences talks about that. Building your own spiritual practice can really be helpful in many ways. The book Soulcraft, particularly for nature, for connecting to nature, that's a good one. So these are some resources for that. Many of my clients, they talk about even like they have premonitions, or they have psychic abilities, or they might be energy healers, or have angelic support. So it's kind of tricky because sometimes that's misdiagnosed as something's wrong with you. So you want to be really careful about how you listen to your clients who are talking about their particular spirituality, and you getting support for your own. Now, I'm not talking about parenting in this little presentation, but I just wanted to mention, the comment, I'm just a mom raising a kid who's still throwing tantrum, and she's 8 years old. I just wanted to mention a couple of resources for those of you who are parents or who are working with parents. This one book is a recent publication, The Gifted Parenting Journey. So it talks about gifted children, raising gifted children, and it also how if you're the parent, how to get support for yourself. My colleague Gail Post, she's now on Substack, and she has a great blog with many, many articles for parents of gifted children. This book now has been out for a while. Tom Klein's The Boy Who Played with Fusion. It's just a great read. He's a great writer. And if you want an interesting story about a boy who was profoundly gifted and how his parents dealt with the school system and what they did to help him get through school. It's just a very entertaining and well-written book. All right. And then finally, we are almost finished. I just had to put this quote on this presentation. This was written on my blog. This was written by one of the lovely people who read my blog. He talks about his mind palace, and he says, "The ideas in my mind palace sit there, gathering dust on easels and drafting tables in long corridors lined with the mahogany cabinets of imagination, abandoned for fear that they are too much, that I am too much, that if the world saw inside, it would rightly conclude I was an alien and fire me into space." And I always get a little choked up when I read that. He's a beautiful soul, and our rainforest-minded people are amazing, dear souls, and they are misunderstood often and lonely often, and that's a great representation of that. He's got a gorgeous mind palace, as our rainforest-minded people do. And finally, I include this because it's so uplifting about the future. We stand on the threshold of a great unknown. Individually and collectively, we launch into an uncertain future, at once both perilous and saturated with possibility. Our accustomed, culturally determined roles and identities are inadequate to navigate the sea change of our time. Our collective journey requires a radical shift in the human relationship with the community of all life, a cultural transformation so profound that future humans might regard it as an evolution of consciousness. Safe passage requires each of us to offer our full magnificence to the world. And that's what I would like to really end with, that that this is all really about you finding your magnificence and understanding that about yourself, your self-confidence, your self-love, and that for your clients, and help them and you recognize your magnificence and then find a way to offer it to the world. Here is a list of resources, some of which I mentioned, most of which I mentioned, and there we go. Thank you so much for listening and coming. And if you want to reach out to me, I would love to hear from you and hear how this was for you, and any questions that you have. Since we're not interacting, you can ask me questions. Send me an email at paula@rainforestmind.com, and I would be happy to answer your questions. Thanks so much.